I was 5 years old when my father's lie carved itself into the marrow of my bones. I didn't even know it was a lie then. All I knew was the hush-hush tension behind the hospital door, my mother's trembling hands gripping mine so tight I couldn't feel my fingers. I shouldn't have seen anything, but I did. Peeking through a gap in the door, I saw two men, my father and another man in a gray coat, passing a squirming, red-faced newborn between them like a parcel too heavy for one alone to carry. My mother kept whispering, "It's all for the best, darling. He'll have a better life." But the way her voice cracked on better told me it wasn't true. That memory rotted quietly in the back of my mind for years, surfacing only as nightmares and strange silences at family dinners. When I was 10, my so-called brother, Ethan, was introduced to me as if he had always been there. My parents framed it as adoption, as saving a child no one wanted. I tried to believe them. I really did. But some part of me always smelled the decay under the pretty words. Ethan and I were close in the way forced siblings often are, entangled, competitive, each needing to prove something the other one threatened just by existing. He was charming where I was intense, golden-haired where I was dark-browed and moody. Teachers loved him, girls adored him. I despised him so quietly, so politely, that even I didn't hear it until I met Claire. Claire was sunlight to my shadows. Sharp laughter, messy hair, eyes that promised she'd never be anyone's secret. For a while, she was mine alone. She said she liked my honesty, my cynicism, my need to protect her from a world too cruel for her softness. She said she hated men like Ethan, whose smiles were knives sheathed in dimples. But some poisons work slowly. Sometimes I wonder if I set them up, always dragging her to family dinners, always pushing her to see my brother through my eyes. Maybe I wanted proof that I wasn't the only one who felt him dripping poison into everything good. Or maybe I just wanted to see if she'd stay loyal to my shadows once she tasted his sunlight. Years later, when I caught them together, my fiancé and my brother, bodies pressed up against the window of my father's old study, I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just remembered the hospital, the trade, the lie. I realized then, betrayal was the family heirloom none of us could escape. Now, as I stand over the shards of my engagement and the shards of my family's fragile pretense, I have no illusions left. Ethan thinks he's won. Claire thinks I'm broken. They're both right in a way, but neither of them has seen what a man can do when his entire life has been training him to smile while burying knives. After the night I found them pressed together like thieves caught by moonlight, I didn't confront them. Not right away. It would have been too merciful. Instead, I slipped back into the shadows I'd always pretended to hate, and I watched them drown in their own deception. Ethan tried to cover his tracks with the same careless arrogance he'd always used to charm his way through life. He brought Claire home for family dinners as if nothing had happened, sitting at the same table where he first sat as a counterfeit child. He'd catch my eye over the mashed potatoes and grin that grin I'd once envied as a boy, all teeth and secrets. Claire was worse in some ways. She carried her guilt like an ill-fitting coat she refused to take off. She still texted me at midnight, "I miss you. I'm sorry. It was a mistake." Yet by morning she'd be on Ethan's arm, head tipped back in laughter that sounded too forced to fool anyone but herself. My parents, of course, played dumb. My mother clutched her pearls at the suggestion that anything was amiss. My father, the architect of the first betrayal, congratulated Ethan on finally finding a good match, as if the match hadn't been stolen from my bed while I still warmed it. But betrayal rarely works alone. It invites more betrayal to the table like a gluttonous host. So I fed it. I played the dutiful son, the gracious ex, the loyal brother. I watched them grow comfortable, careless. They thought my silence was surrender, but it was an autopsy. I wanted to see how far they'd rot before I carved them open. I started with Claire. I knew her tells better than my own heartbeat, the way she picked at her thumbnail when she lied, the tremor in her voice when she needed to be forgiven. I let her come to me, trembling at my door one rainy evening, mascara smudged, mouth forming apologies that scraped my ears raw. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "You have to believe me." I took her hands in mine, felt her pulse race like a cornered animal's. Of course I believe you, I lied smoothly. You're not the one to blame. And in that moment, she almost believed me, because she wanted so desperately to believe herself innocent. With her trust renewed, I peeled her open slowly. Late night calls under the guise of closure. Meetings at coffee shops where I'd drop questions like poison seeds. Did Ethan tell you about that time he stole from Dad's company? Did you know he almost went to jail? Half-truths, twisted truths, outright lies. It didn't matter. Doubt does most of the work on its own when planted in fertile guilt. Meanwhile, Ethan swaggered through his conquest as though he discovered a new toy. He paraded Claire in front of friends who used to toast our engagement. He bragged behind my back about how he'd freed her from my possessive moods. It was the same script he'd used our whole lives. Take what's mine, polish it up, pretend it was his birthright all along. But Ethan's flaw was never understanding that I didn't fight fair. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I learned from my father that true betrayal blooms best in silence. So I made myself useful. I offered to help plan their engagement party, a delicious mockery of the one Claire and I had been arranging just months before. My mother wept with relief that her boys were close again. My father raised his glass and called it family healing. If they only knew. Each day I added tiny cuts to Ethan's perfect image. A word in the ear of his boss about questionable expense reports. A confidential email forwarded to a client he'd backstabbed. All traceable back to him, not me. I wanted him to feel the walls close in while he clung tighter to the one person he thought would never turn on him. Claire. Claire, who by now was fragile and jumpy, gnawed by guilt and the suspicion that Ethan wasn't the hero she'd chosen over me. She began to notice the things I left for her to find. A text from another woman on his phone, a lipstick smudge that wasn't hers, a receipt for a hotel room he never told her about. Some true, some forged. But the difference didn't matter once her trust began to bleed out. I watched her unravel in real time. The way she flinched when Ethan touched her. The way she lingered at my doorstep a little too long, begging for comfort she didn't deserve. And always, always that look in her eyes, searching for the man she betrayed, praying he'd forgive her sins if she just cried hard enough. I gave her nothing but a gentle smile, let her rot in her own contradictions. Ethan, of course, thought he was still the star of his own cheap drama. He confronted me once in the garden behind our parents' house, a glass of whiskey sloshing in his hand. The smell of roses mixed sickeningly with his sweat. "You think you're clever?" he spat, voice slurred with bravado. "You think I don't see what you're doing? You always wanted to be me, but you never had the balls." I laughed in his face. That was the crack he never saw coming. He expected rage, fists, a desperate plea for my fiancée back. But I just laughed, soft and broken at first, then louder until he flinched like I'd struck him. "You still don't get it, Ethan," I said, voice so calm it made him step back. "I never wanted to be you. I wanted to be your ending." I left him there staring after me, his illusions peeling away like old paint. He had no idea how much of his world was already rotting from the inside out. And Claire? Claire still clung to hope that somehow this could be forgiven, rewritten, undone. She didn't realize she was the final pawn, the match I'd strike when the fuel was ready. My father once traded a child to protect his legacy. Now I would trade his legacy to burn every lie we'd built this family on. And Ethan and Claire, they'd watch it burn from inside the house they thought they stole from me. In the weeks after that night in the garden, the cracks in Ethan's life spread like fractures through glass. Beautiful to watch if you know where to look. I became an expert in knowing exactly where to look. Claire called me at odd hours now, her voice a ghost of the girl who once made me believe love could cleanse me of this family's rot. She wanted answers I would never give her directly. The why of betrayal, the how of forgiveness. She didn't understand that the answers were buried too deep, older than us, older than the lie my father bartered behind that hospital door. Every time she spoke my name, soft, guilty, desperate, it reminded me that I was no longer the boy begging for scraps of loyalty. I was the storm at the edge of her safe little house, and she had invited me in the moment she thought she could love both brothers without consequence. Ethan's facade, meanwhile, slipped further every day. The rumors I seeded at his workplace sprouted into whispered suspicions about embezzlement, harassment, conflict of interest. Nothing proven, but enough to make him sweat. He fired back, of course, with that feral confidence of his, trying to plug each leak with new lies. But lies only multiply when cornered. One morning, I watched from my car as he stumbled out of his condo, tie askew, phone pressed to his ear. He was barking threats at someone. I guessed a junior employee he'd scapegoat to save himself. His eyes flicked across the street and met mine through the windshield. I raised my coffee cup at him, a toast to our ruin. He flipped me off. I nearly laughed. The truth is, I didn't hate him anymore. Not in the way I once did. Hate implies you want the other person to feel it. I didn't. I wanted him empty, his reflection showing him exactly what he was. A counterfeit, just like the life our father traded for his existence. The more I watched him break, the more I realized something unsettling. I was no longer acting out revenge. I was excavating myself. Layer by layer, I was tearing away every polite mask this family stitched onto me. What if this darkness wasn't corruption, but liberation? A permission to become honest in a world built on false smiles. One night, as if to test this theory, I invited Claire to my apartment. She arrived soaked from the rain, trembling in a coat too thin for November's bite. I let her in without a word and handed her a towel. We didn't speak for a long time. She sat on my sofa, eyes flicking to the picture frame she once helped me hang. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like thin ice. I keep dreaming about us. Not you and me. Not now. But us. Before. When you still looked at me like I was... She couldn't finish. I didn't help her. Instead, I knelt in front of her, resting my hands on her knees. She flinched at first, a tiny recoil, then sagged as if every bone had dissolved. "Why are you here, Claire?" I asked. My voice was low, gentle, cruel in how soft it sounded. She squeezed her eyes shut. "I don't know who he is anymore. I don't know who I am anymore." "You never did," I said, and this time my voice was tender because the truth should be spoken softly when it cuts this deep. Her tears came then, heavy, silent. She buried her hands in my hair, her touch desperate, familiar, unwanted and wanted all at once. I let her kiss me, tasting salt and regret. I let her whisper apologies against my mouth. Then I pushed her back, not roughly but firmly enough that she gasped like a broken violin string. "You don't get to come back, Claire. Not like this. Not ever." She stared at me, horror dawning through her ruin of hope. I could almost see her understanding. I was no longer the safe place she ran to after torching my trust. I was the final reckoning she would have to survive. She fled into the night. I didn't follow. Alone I sat in the dark, the echo of her perfume coiling through the room like smoke. A part of me, the boy who watched a brother traded for a name, wanted to be comforted by her touch again. But that part was dying, gasping its last in the cage I'd built for it. By now the rumors at Ethan's firm had reached critical mass. An internal audit, a board inquiry, old skeletons dragged blinking into the daylight. My father tried to intervene, the great patriarch swooping in to fix another mess with hush money and veiled threats. But this time, I'd scattered too many breadcrumbs, too many witnesses. There would be no quiet burial. At the same time, I pressed my parents into the corner I'd been building for years. All it took was an anonymous tip to a hungry journalist, a whisper of a child trade, a long, cold hospital scandal, hush payments disguised as charity donations. Within days, the story hit the local news cycle like a grenade. My father's carefully tended image, the respectable philanthropist, the community savior, curdled overnight into suspicion and tabloid frenzy. At the next family dinner, we sat around the same mahogany table that had hosted decades of polite lies. My mother picked at her food like a ghost. My father drank more wine than usual, jaw tight, eyes flicking to the silent phone on the sideboard, waiting for the next call from his lawyer. Ethan tried to smile at me, but it cracked before it reached his eyes. Claire was conspicuously absent. She'd fled the city, rumor had it, to stay with distant relatives. Cowardice looks the same in every generation. Halfway through the meal, my father slammed his glass down so hard, red wine sprayed across the white tablecloth. "Are you proud of yourself?" he hissed. His voice was poison and desperation wrapped in thin silk. I met his gaze calmly. "Define proud, Dad. I'm not hiding anymore, if that's what you mean." He lunged to stand, but my mother grabbed his arm, not out of love, but to keep the mask from slipping further in front of the staff hovering at the door. We were the perfect family, remember? Even as our guts spilled out onto bone china. Ethan threw his napkin down. "You think this makes you better than me? You think you've won?" I laughed, a sound that didn't belong to the polite son they raised. "No, Ethan, there's nothing to win. There's just what's left after the truth burns everything down." In that moment, I realized something brutal and freeing. I didn't hate them. Not anymore. I pitied them. Pity is a scalpel sharper than revenge. It strips a man's pride faster than a bullet. After dinner, my father cornered me alone on the back patio. The night smelled of dying roses and cold stone. "You ungrateful bastard," he rasped. "I gave you everything. Everything you are is because I kept that secret. Do you think anyone would respect you if they knew how dirty your blood really is?" I stepped close enough that he could see the thing he'd made in my eyes. A creature he couldn't trade or silence anymore. "No, Father, everything I am is because I survived you." When I turned and left him there, shivering in the dark, I felt lighter than I ever had under this cursed roof. Inside me, the last illusions were dead. What remained was mine alone, raw, clean, honest. And very soon, they would all see what honesty could do when it wore my face. The day it all detonated, the sky was clear and sharp as broken glass. A cruel joke, considering what I had planned to do under its perfect blue. I didn't dress like a man going to war. I wore my best suit, the one Claire once said made me look unreachable. How fitting. Unreachable. Unbreakable. Unclaimed by their dirty legacy at last. I arrived at my father's office just before the press conference he'd scheduled to address the scandal with dignity. He was still clinging to the illusion he could smother the truth with a prepared statement and a few crocodile tears. Security didn't dare stop me. Who would question the loyal elder son arriving to support Daddy in crisis? Inside, the old man sat at his desk, hands steepled, an unread speech glowing on his laptop. "You shouldn't be here," he barked, though his eyes darted behind me, already searching for cameras, witnesses, anything to keep this confrontation polite. I smiled and shut the door. The click of the latch sounded like a final nail tapping into a coffin. "Don't worry, I'm not here to ruin your redemption tour," I said, walking slowly toward his desk. "I'm here to say goodbye." He scoffed. "You think you've won because you embarrassed me? You think the board won't forgive me after a few months? I built this empire." "You traded your first son for it," I cut in sharply. "Then you taught your replacement how to steal everything I ever loved. And you wonder why the foundations are rotting." He stood up, veins pulsing at his temple. "I did what I had to do. He was sickly, useless. And I was a witness," I murmured. 5 years old. Small enough to believe your bedtime stories, but old enough to remember the screaming." His mouth opened, closed, a dying fish gasping on a polished hook. I leaned in until my breath fogged the framed family photo on his desk. "I'm not here to destroy you, Father. You did that yourself. I'm here to make sure you don't rise from the ashes." I slid the USB drive across his antique oak. Everything. Bank records, offshore accounts, bribes, backroom deals, all gift-wrapped for the board and the DA. He stared at the little black stick as if it were a snake coiled to strike. "You're bluffing." "Check the news feed," I said. My tone was almost boring. "By the time you finish your statement, the leaks will already be on the front page. The board is gathering now. Without you. And me? I'm giving my own press interview in 20 minutes. My statement will be the nail in the coffin." He lunged for my arm, fury cracking through his mask of authority. "You think they'll accept you after this? You're just as tainted as me." I shook him off like an old coat. "Number, I'm free. I stopped carrying your sins the second I decided not to forgive you. He slumped back, deflated. A king stripped naked before his throne. Get out, he whispered. You're no son of mine. I paused at the door and looked back. Really looked. He seemed smaller than ever. A man reduced to skin and secrets. You're right, I said quietly. I never was. I left the building to a wall of reporters hungry for blood. Cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. In the middle of the chaos, I saw Ethan, disheveled, eyes darting like a cornered wolf. He pushed through the mob and grabbed my lapel. You did this! You ruined us! Us? I laughed and the sound startled even me. It was clear and calm. The laugh of a man unburdened by shame. You ruined yourself, brother. I just showed everyone what you really are. He trembled, lips white with rage, but his fists stayed limp at his sides. All his life, he stole my strength because he thought it made him whole. He never learned how to stand alone. Before he could spit another lie, the police cruiser pulled up to the curb. Two detectives stepped out, one for my father upstairs, the other for Ethan's white-collar fraud. Poetic symmetry, the real son and the counterfeit, dragged out together under the same spotless sky. As they read Ethan his rights, his eyes found mine one last time. I thought maybe I'd feel triumph. Instead, I felt nothing. I'd cauterized that wound long ago. When it was over, the flash bulbs, the shouts, the sirens fading into distance, I walked until the noise fell away and the city swallowed me whole. I ducked into a quiet park, sat on a bench under a flowering dogwood tree. For a long time, I just breathed. The wind felt like freedom against my raw skin. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire. I hadn't blocked her yet, maybe because some perverse part of me needed to see her final words. I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk? I stared at it, a relic of another life. I thought of the nights I dreamed of her forgiveness, how desperately I'd once craved the lie that her love could patch the holes my family drilled into me. I typed only 2 words before deleting her contact forever. Too late. Above me, the branches swayed. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of borrowed blood pressing me down. Everything they stole, I reclaimed. Everything I lost, I became. And the man I am now, he needs no witness, no apology, no stolen name. He is mine alone, forged in betrayal, tempered in truth, unreachable, unbreakable, finally undeniably free. It's strange the things you notice once the shouting stops. The day after my father's arrest, I woke in a bed that no longer smelled of secrets. Sunlight poured through my half-open blinds, and for the first time I didn't brace for it like an interrogation lamp. I brewed my coffee, black and bitter, just how I liked it when nobody was watching. Outside my window, the city crawled on, oblivious to the dynasty it had just watched devour itself alive. I smiled at that. Life so wonderfully indifferent to what we believe makes us special. I spent the next few weeks packing my old apartment, not escaping, simply discarding the past room by room. Each box felt like a burial. Claire's perfume lingering on an old scarf, a photo of Ethan and me as boys, forced smiles at some charity gala, letters from my mother written in her tidy, distant script. Be strong for us. Be perfect for us. Be theirs. No more. One morning I stood at the river's edge where the city breathed its filth into the current and watched my reflection ripple. The man who stared back was leaner now, sharper in the eyes, softer in the mouth, a contradiction that made perfect sense. Beside me, a plastic bag bulged with the last scraps of my old life. I opened it, piece by piece, feeding the river. A pair of engraved cufflinks my father gave me on my graduation. A tie Claire bought on our first anniversary. A business card with Ethan's embossed signature, once proof of his borrowed power. They vanished under the current like secrets too small to matter anymore. I whispered to the water, keep them. They're yours now. And the river, faithful witness that it is, carried them away. The world did what it always does after a scandal. It gorged itself on the spectacle, then moved on to the next fresh ruin. My father's empire fractured into lawsuits and hush settlements. Ethan's face flickered on TV screens until even the gossip shows got bored of his mugshot. My mother, ever the survivor, retreated to some European villa, pretending to be a widow rather than an accomplice. And Claire, I heard she tried to come back once. She left messages with old friends, mutual contacts. She claimed she wanted to apologize properly, to explain how she was manipulated. But explanations are for when you owe someone hope, and I owed her none. When her third attempt to reach me failed, she stopped trying. Last I heard, she was living quietly in a coastal town up north, dating a school teacher, pretending betrayal is something you can outrun. I wish her peace, but not forgiveness. Forgiveness would mean I still carry her inside me, and I don't. My revenge in the end wasn't the spectacle. It wasn't the arrest or the scandal or the ruin printed in bold headlines. It was this: waking every day knowing I own my name now, my story, my goddamn breath. No brother to shadow me, no father to barter my soul, no woman to cradle my wounds just to taste their salt. I rented a small flat across town, high up with creaking floors and stubborn windows. No family portraits here, no polished trophies on the shelf. Just my books, my files, and a battered desk facing the skyline. At night, when the city hums like a living animal under neon, I sit by that window and write. Memories mostly. Not for anyone to read. Just for me, to see the shape of the wounds and marvel at the fact they no longer bleed. Sometimes I walk past the old neighborhood where I once played with Ethan before we understood we were rivals wearing the same mask. The houses look smaller now. The garden fence where Claire first kissed me is chipped and leaning. Even ghosts lose their grandeur when you see them in the daylight. Last week, a boy of 5 ran up to me near the park. He tripped on a broken swing, scraped his knee raw. He stared at me with huge eyes, not crying yet, just on the verge. Without thinking, I knelt and tied my handkerchief around his leg. His mother arrived breathless, thanking me again and again. I barely heard her. I was watching the boy, how he sniffled, brave and small and trusting. I wondered, did I look like that once? Before the trade? Before the lies? For a moment I wanted to tell him, stay soft, little man. Guard it like a treasure, because once they take it, you spend decades stealing it back. But I said nothing. He didn't need my warnings. His life was his to bruise and bandage as he pleased. Last night I dreamed of my father's study again, except this time it was empty. The desk was gone. The shelves are bare. No family crest on the wall, just a single chair facing the window. I woke up smiling. Even my nightmares had gotten bored of him. This morning I opened the final box. Inside, one last relic I hadn't found the strength to throw away. A faded hospital bracelet. Mine, from the day they swapped my brother for a future I was never meant to have. I held it to my chest just once, felt its sharp edges of memory. Then I walked it to the trash chute and let it go. A small sound, metal swallowing plastic, then silence. Outside my window the city breathes, ignorant of old trades and quiet revolutions. Inside this room, a man lives who trades nothing of himself for anyone else's blessing. A man who knows exactly who he is and loves that man more fiercely than he ever loved a family that couldn't love him back. This is my name now, mine. And tomorrow when the sun comes up, I will wear it like armor. For support, do like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.